Sometimes the sacred is secular, at other times the secular is sacred. Here's a thought. Religion is where you find it. That is to say, if you're willing to think beyond the traditions we've covered, Christianity and Islam, and you're willing to explore the idea that folks create life meaning in a variety of ways, in a variety of locations, you're well on your way to understanding religion as a quest for complex subjectivity, and you're well on your way to rethinking the nature and meaning of hip-hop. Now, this is our last session together, and we're at Music World. And we're hoping that Music World in Houston's 3rd Ward will remind you yet again of the deep creativity within cultural production. Think beyond the dance, think beyond the lyrics, think beyond the paintings, and simply understand that cultural production like hip-hop is expansive and covers a lot of life meaning. In fact, this is what we want you to wrestle with. We want you to wrestle with the idea that hip-hop actually replaces traditional forms of religion. Let's recap. Again, we've asked you to think about religion in 2 ways. First, to think about religion within the context of religious traditions that you are very familiar with, Christianity and Islam. We've also asked you to think about religion as a general quest for complex subjectivity. That is to say, we've asked you to think about religion as a general way in which folks make life meaningful by wrestling with the fundamental questions of human existence. Who are we? What are we? Where are we? Why are we? And we've called this quest the quest for complex subjectivity. Now, let's push this a little further. Thinking about religion as a general quest for complex subjectivity forces us to rethink 2 terms, the sacred and the secular. It's often been the case that we've used these terms to mark out very different realities. I'm suggesting during this session that thinking about religion as a quest for complex subjectivity hampers the ability to think about the sacred and secular as distinct modes of experience. Instead, we're forced to think about the sacred and the secular as overlapping, embedded in each other, pointing to the same frame of human experience, simply interpreted in different ways. Let me give you some examples. Again, religion is the quest for complex subjectivity. It's about making life meaningful. It's not confined to any particular space. It's not confined to any particular set of practices. It isn't owned by Christian churches, and it isn't owned by Islam. You might even think then of sports as encompassing this quest for complex subjectivity. Before you tune me out, just hear me out. Think about football and the kind of allegiance that folks have to football. If we think about religion as involving on some level ritual structures, and again, we're thinking about ritual as repeated activity in founded space. The idea that folks go to a particular location on Sundays to watch their team perform, and that there are certain activities that are repeated each Sunday would suggest ritual practices. It has its language, football. It has its high priest, commentators who have a certain range of experience and knowledge that they share with others. There's a deep devotion around team and team dynamics. There are also ways in which football provides a certain moral and ethical compass for folks. This is one reason some parents are so interested in having their children participate in Little League football, despite some of the health risks, because it provides a way of getting them to think differently about themselves and themselves in relationship to others. That it provides a certain moral and ethical compass, a sense of accountability and responsibility, a sense of connection to something beyond themselves. Another example, museums. Now, I'm not the first to say that museums can constitute not only a religious experience, but a religious environment. That is to say that museums open themselves up to folks in a way that allows them to wrestle with fundamental questions of their existence. The paintings, the sculptures, etc., other pieces of artwork present to them opportunities for deep reflection in the same way that attending a church service, walking into a church, or walking into a mosque invites deep reflection, deep consideration of fundamental life issues. So I've mentioned two ways of thinking about religion as the quest for complex subjectivity that push us well beyond the boundaries of churches and mosques. I've mentioned sports and museums. Let's take it a little further and talk in terms of malls. Now, hear me out before you tune me out on this. Think about it this way, that if ritual involves repeated activity in founded space, there are ways in which the trek to the mall can constitute a ritual exercise for some. It's an opportunity for community, for relationships, for gathering that allow folks to reflect on who they are, where they are, their strengths, their weaknesses, their wants, their needs, their desires, and in this way to forge a conversation, to forge practices that revolve around life meaning. This is significant. It's more than about going to the mall and buying a t-shirt or a pair of jeans. It's about an opportunity to exercise a different dimension of what it means to be human, and to do that in the context of others. In a very real way, that's some of the basic stuff of religion. Now, what I've suggested in terms of sports, museums, and malls might be a stretch for you, but let's keep in mind what that exercise was intended to produce. What it was meant to get you to do is to think more expansively concerning what culture is and what cultural production is meant to achieve. If you do that, then you've positioned yourself to understand the ways in which hip-hop culture might just do more than support or critique religious institutions. If you understand culture in this way, understand the heavy lifting that culture does, you've positioned yourself to understand that hip-hop, in fact, can replace religious traditions and in a very real way can provide folks with all they need to wrestle with fundamental questions of life meaning. No churches, no mosques, just hip-hop. We've pushed beyond churches and mosques to consider sports, museums, and malls as locations for the religious and, in fact, the religious in and of themselves. Why were we able to do this? Because religion is a flexible and porous category. It captures what humans do in the process of making life meaningful, and it is without boundaries and borders. Why think about hip-hop in this way? Well, it's not just me saying you should. Fans of hip-hop talk about artists, talk about the culture in a way that suggests it does this kind of heavy religious lifting. Now, Professor Bun B is going to take you further in that conversation. If you combine what I've told you with what Professor Bun B is going to tell you, and add to that the readings, the shout-outs, and other materials, you'll be well on your way to forging a deep understanding of how hip-hop functions as a religion.